and welcome to New Wave Global, and you are watching Unraveled. I'm your host, Marvi Sirmed. On April 15th, the Army Chief of Pakistan, General Asim Munir, once again did what he's not supposed to do. That is, deliver a highly political speech, which was in many ways divisive, consisting of shallow rhetoric, toxic masculinity, and superficial bravado. He stood before a gathering of overseas Pakistanis in Islamabad and delivered what, on the surface of it, looked like a sort of unifying address. But in reality, it was a performance, an orchestrated display of nationalistic theatrics meant to mask the deeper crisis of authoritarian overreach in Pakistan. Scratch beneath the carefully polished veneer, and you won't find vision or leadership. You will find the same old military doctrine masquerading as destiny. A speech soaked in myth making, historical revisionism, and the familiar drumbeat of a state that continues to conflate itself with a uniform. One of our former colleagues and a former minister in the recent caretaker setup before just before the 2024 elections, termed this awful excuse of a speech as a motivational lecture. I mean, well, my response to this learned colleague would be, in a country where elected leaders are routinely jailed, political parties are engineered in army safe houses, journalists are abducted in broad daylight, and courts echo the will of the brass rather than the law and the constitution. When a general lectures the nation on unity and resilience, it is not inspiration, it is an insult. Let's take the speech apart, line by line, claim by claim. Because what General Asim Munir said was not just another harmless PR event. It was a dangerous reaffirmation of the militarization of Pakistan's democracy, the distortion of its founding ideals, a clear, unambiguous pronouncement of the continuation of this hybrid authoritarian regime, and most importantly, the erasure of a secular promise, if that ever existed. But some of us definitely believed, we suspected that this promise was there in the context of the 11th August 1947 speech by the founder of the nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Now, let's start with what the general said about terrorism. Even 10 generations of terrorists can't harm Pakistan. Well, a nice sounding line. Yeah, let's give him that. But let's ask, who built those terror infrastructures? Who armed and nurtured the monsters we are now pretending to slay? From the so-called strategic depth policy in Afghanistan to the rehabilitation of sectarian killers and, importantly, patronage of so-called Kashmir jihad. The military establishment has both. It has been arsonist and it has been firefighter at the same time in what is Pakistan's security theater. And when the army chief speaks of terrorism yesterday, let's be clear, he isn't just referring to TTP or ISIS or all these Islamic terrorist outfits. He's very deliberately equating the legitimate Baloch resistance with terrorism, an erasure that is as cruel as it is calculated. The military has relentlessly tried to delegitimize peaceful Baloch rights activists, especially the Baloch Yakjehti Committee and its iconic leader, Dr. Mahroom Baloch, by framing them as the political face of the Balochistan Liberation Army, the militant separatist organization. This accusation is not only factually unsupported, it is morally repugnant. It's a textbook strategy of authoritarian regimes. Equate dissent with treason and activism with terrorism. Let's be clear. We at New Wave Global unequivocally condemn terrorism and the use of violence by any group for anything, including the BLA and other, armed factions of any ethnicity, let alone Baloch. There can be no justification, we think, for targeting civilians or pursuing political aims through violence, whatever aims through violence. But this condemnation of militancy cannot be used as a blank check to criminalize peaceful democratic resistance. The legitimate, non-violent movement for Baloch rights, led by the groups like the Baloch Yakjehti Committee BYC, is rooted in a struggle for dignity, equality, and justice. To conflate that with insurgency is dishonest and, to be frank, dangerous. And yes, it may be true that elements of the Baloch insurgency might have received support from India or Afghanistan or whatever. But to use this to discredit all Baloch voices is an act of intellectual cowardice and authoritarian manipulation. It not only silences the victims, it creates fertile ground for further violence by cutting off any avenue for democratic redress. And let's not forget, the Baloch insurgency and militancy have also arisen out of the militarization of Balochistan due to the prolonged presence of the military there and the absolute impunity it has had for decades in that fateful part of Pakistan. So when he speaks of eliminating terror, he's conveniently silent on the fact that much of it was born in the barracks. This strategy has had devastating consequences. In mainland Pakistan, for example, public opinion has been systematically turned against Baloch activists who are now routinely vilified, they are harassed, they are trolled, and even threatened. The military, with the help of a pliant media, I call it Pakistani variety of Godi media, has built a fortress of lies around Balochistan. And inside that fortress, no one is allowed to ask questions, necessary questions. Consider the recent events involving Sardar Akhtar Mengal, a Baloch leader from Balochistan National Party, Mengal Group, BNPM. In March this year, not many days ago, Sardar Mengal launched a long march to protest the arrest of Dr. Maharang Baloch and other BYC activists. The state obstructed this peaceful demonstration, and authorities prevented the march from entering Quetta, and Sardar Mengal was effectively placed under house arrest. Facing mounting pressure and citing concerns over public discomfort and inconvenience, he was compelled to call off the sit-in, which continued for 20 days at in Mastung district at Lakpas. Mr. Mengal has described the arrest of Maharang as unconstitutional, and he also lamented the state's creation of obstacles in their peaceful protest efforts. Now, that's a fact which unfortunately does not have many takers in Pakistani media and Punjab-dominated mainland. Well, yeah. Thanks to the propaganda tactics and information blackout of Balochistan by the military establishment. This is not counter-terrorism, General. This is not counter-terrorism. This is counter-truth. And it must be exposed. Count me in. Count me for that. Trust me for that. Then came in his speech the diaspora segment. Yeah, the famous overseas Pakistanis. Now, you are the brilliance of Pakistan. How poetic. Except many in that diaspora, not the ones who were sitting there, but overall diaspora, they have fled the country not for economic opportunity alone, but for freedom, for censorship, religious persecution, and a climate of fear engineered by the very institutions you, General, are leading. Brain gain? No, 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 no. It's brain drain indeed, brain drain. And it has been caused by decades of systemic decay under your institution's watch. Rather, it was actually triggered by your institution in the first place. And then came the real giveaway. Pakistan was created in the name of Islam. No, General. Pakistan was not created for mullahs. It was never conceived as a theocracy. It wasn't created for military men wielding religion as a bludgeon. It was created explicitly by Qazi Muhammad Ali Jinnah and his comrades, who stood on August 11, 1947, and told the world that religion was a personal matter, that Hindus would cease to be Hindus and Muslims would cease to be Muslims, not in terms of faith, but in terms of citizenship. To twist Jinnah's secular, or maybe, well, I'll give you that, pluralist promise into a theocratic justification for authoritarianism is not just historical revisionism, it is ideological violence. And I would say ideological terrorism, since he is fond of coining new terms every time he opens his mouth. Let us not forget, Pakistan was created in the name of minority rights, not religious domination. Yes, in the name of religious identity, but really, certainly not for religious domination. Muslims were the largest religious minority in India at that time. And it is because of this that some of the lower caste Hindu Dalit groups and the Christian groups supported the demand for Pakistan. In fact, it was a Christian deputy speaker of the Punjab Assembly in the United India whose casting vote for Pakistan was crucial in the partition of Punjab and inclusion of a large part of Punjab in Pakistan. Also, let me now address the falsehood, another falsehood that he used in his awful speech. That is of the two-nation theory. This so-called theory posits that Hindus and Muslims are separate nations due to differences in their culture, their religions, their heroes, their literature, their ways of living, etc. But if Hindus and Muslims are so separate, so different, and they're so different that they cannot live together, where does that place Pakistani Hindus? Does he want to get rid of them altogether? Really? I mean, that doesn't sound very patriotic, does it? If Muslims are different from Hindus, they're also different from other, religious identities. They're different from, for example, in culture and religion, from Christians. Yet, many Muslims live peacefully in Western Christian-dominated countries. And many aspire to become citizens of those countries. I mean, conversely, significant numbers of Muslims from Pakistan, okay, let's take from the number from Pakistan, they do not seek to move to Muslim majority countries. They rather want to go to America, they want to go to UK, Australia, New Zealand, Scandinavia, in all these countries in Europe. If Muslims are part of one nation, how did Bangladesh split from Pakistan in 1971? How is it that another Muslim majority country, Afghanistan, was among the last to recognize Pakistan? When did they do it? 1948. When was Pakistan made? When was Pakistan came into, being? 1947. Then, on the point about Kashmir, the general referred to it as Pakistan's jugular vein. What kind of jugular vein is it that Pakistan has been living without for over 75 years of its existence? You know, the general also needs to be asked about the reported back channel communication between India and Pakistan um, before India abrogated Article 370 in 2019 that took away Kashmir's special status. So Kashmir is now part of India, just like other states. If Kashmir was so important to Pakistan, to you, General, why did your institution extend a tacit approval of this unilateral action by India through their constitutional amendment? Why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you people say anything? Then came Gaza. Well, he could have fooled me for them being heartfelt words. He tried his best. But what moral right does the Pakistan army have to speak of Palestinian suffering when Baloch bodies turn up in mass graves, when journalists are tortured, when sectarian mobs roam free with impunity, when Ahmadis are not allowed to say their prayers? Oh, sod it. They are not even allowed to exist. So, my 2 cents for the general would be solidarity abroad cannot be substitute for justice at home. So here's the real question. Why is a military chief lecturing civilians about ideology, national identity, and even foreign policy? Why does an unelected man in uniform get to define who we are as a people? Because this is not just about one speech. This is about an institution that has usurped our politics, hijacked our history, co-opted our religion, and occupied the space where our democracy should breathe. And to overseas Pakistanis in the room where, who were cheering and applauding the general that day, you are being fed a lie. A beautifully worded, it may be, a flag draped, medal polished lie. And it is your moral duty to challenge it, not cheer it. Pakistan doesn't need generals who speak like ideologues. It needs citizens who speak like leaders. It needs voters who vote. It needs dissenters who dissent. It needs more of Dr. Mahrangs. It needs historians who remember the truth and are not afraid to, put it across. And it needs activists who won't let that truth be buried under layers of Khaki mythology. This country was not created for Islamists, nor for military dictators. It was created for a people who were denied their legitimate rights, their place in history, for minorities, for the marginalized, for those silenced by majoritarian arrogance. That was the promise. And that is the promise we must reclaim. We must reclaim. Until then, no speech, no matter how well choreographed, can heal what the boots have crushed. This was Unraveled. I'm Marvi Sirmed. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to keep independent journalism alive. And in the comments below, tell us, what does the future of democracy in Pakistan look like to you? With the generals or without the generals? An ever-strengthening hybrid regime or a truly democratic dispensation? Write it down and I will answer. Have a good one.